strong economy. You believe in markets, then you should believe in participating.
All right, it is 10:30. Thank you everybody for joining us on this webinar. We're going to be talking about cargo and equipment theft, freight fraud, and we've assembled some industry experts to talk to us. This is co-branded with the Institute for Homeland Security at Sam Houston State University. I'm Grant Threet, Transportation Systems Project Manager, and with the my co-host from the Greater Houston Trucking Association, Liz Castillo. Liz, do you want to say a couple words to kick us off?
Yeah, so I just, first, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Liz Castillo, founder and president of the Greater Houston Trucking Association, and we're honored to host this important conversation on cargo and equipment theft. It's an issue that continues to cost our industry billions annually and impacts small carriers and large fleets alike. So we're excited to do this in collaboration with Sam Houston State University, Institute of Homeland Security, with Grant and our panelists. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Grant, our facilitator, and introduce our speakers.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Yeah, so like I said, I'm Grant Threet with the Institute for Homeland Security at Sam Houston State University. And just real quick, if you haven't heard my elevator speech, I'll give that to you. If you have heard it, I'm sorry. Repeat this again, but we're funded by the Texas legislature through Sam Houston State University to go help critical infrastructure be more secure and resilient. So what we're wanting to do today is to reach out and talk about this important topic. This webinar is being recorded, and we're going to have this posted on our website, ihsonline.org. We'll try and drop that in the chat as well as we go along. We're going to have this up on our website for people to revisit, hopefully as early as tomorrow. We're trying to get that out right away, so I would encourage everybody to share with those who couldn't make it today, but thankful for everybody who is here. So cargo and equipment theft is a growing threat in the trucking industry, costing businesses billions of dollars, as Liz said. Some estimates between 30 billion and 35 billion just in North America alone. We're seeing the report skyrocketing. Some figures show a 600% to even a 1,500% increase just in the last 4 years. The tactics used by these thieves are constantly evolving and moving beyond just straight simple theft into much more sophisticated strategic fraud with all kinds of more complicated scams. Criminals are leveraging technology and making it harder and harder for businesses and individuals, especially small businesses, to stay out in front of it. So we've got some panelists to speak on this topic today. We're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about some of the tactics that we're seeing, especially the more sophisticated tactics that might be harder to perceive. We'll spend 20 minutes talking about some mitigation strategies, and then we'll have about a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of the webinar for all of you as we're going along and you've got questions occurring to you and whatnot. Please drop them in the chat. We're going to have those monitored, and then we'll revisit that at the end, or if you want to turn on your mic and ask a question at the end as well, that'll be fine also. So we've got 3 panelists to talk to us about this topic today. Jim McDonald is our first panelist. He's the Global Security Director with Crane Logistics Worldwide. He's a physical security executive with over 20 years of experience protecting global operations, optimizing risk strategies, and converting security departments from an overhead expense into a value-generating business function. I love that. That's something that we talk about a lot at my institute, is taking security beyond the perception of just being a cost operation, but actually contributing to the bottom line. He's he aligns security initiatives with enterprise goals, secures executive buy-in, and leads multi-million-dollar projects to deliver measurable returns. He's led security strategies for large enterprise organizations, high-risk operations, government entities all across the supply chain, using modern security models to reduce threat exposure and elevate the operational excellence in his organization. Thank you, Jim, for joining us. We also have Matthew Wood joining us. He's the Vice President of Strategic Relationships and General Manager of Cedar Bluff Companies, which includes a portfolio of transportation brands serving both the shipper and the carrier, and includes CB Shipper Solutions, Rubber Duck Funding, Big Rig Fleet Service, and 1836 Logistics. Matthew's experience in the transportation industry is deep and wide. It includes growing and managing a fleet of over 100 trucks. And through his work with Cedar Bluff Companies, he's now focusing on curating solutions for shippers and carriers to address their needs for compliance and financial services, but especially risk mitigation and load management. We also have Danny Ramon joining us. He's the Director of Intelligence and Response at Overhaul. Danny's been working in supply chain security for over 15 years, specializing in supply chain intelligence for the last 13 of those 15. He studies cargo theft and any factor that can affect the flow of cargo through the supply chain to identify how variables might interfere with the flow of global logistics. In his role as the Director of Intelligence and Response at Overhaul, Danny presents these findings to security and logistics teams worldwide, and he's also been featured in numerous industry publications and delivered presentations at many industry conferences. For these three panelists, thank you very much for joining us. And I just want to kick it off. We're going to begin talking about some of these theft tactics to give some context on what we're talking about. And so to start it off, I'd like for each of you to have a chance to talk about what are some of the newer and evolving freight tactics that you're seeing emerge in the industry, maybe beyond just straight theft or pilferage, which is more traditional. And if you can offer a real world example that you've seen or that you know of that kind of highlights the cleverness or the sophistication that some of these thieves are employing. So some of the new and evolved tactics. Jim, if you don't mind, we'll start with you and just give each of our panelists an opportunity to talk.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Obviously, it's a very challenging time right now for security practitioners. One thing that really comes to mind is, from 2022 to 2024, and then now to current strategic thefts, we call the fictitious pickups, has increased to close to 1,500%. This is certainly an animal that we have never dealt with before. And, also too, with the emergence of Ukrainian nationals, Russian nationals, Chinese nationals that are getting into the cargo theft game because of, DAs not wanting to prosecute, or just, because it's easier to do the strategic pickup thefts as opposed to, doing, commercial burglaries, either with our locations or trucks. What we're seeing is a lot of these bad actors are overseas, and they're just using a lot of misdirection and using unwitting parties to, take the freight to different places as part of the scheme, and then ultimately fencing it out of the country, most likely. And so, you kind of have a powder keg here of just DAs not wanting to prosecute, police being very limited, the emergence of these bad actors. And the one common theme that we are seeing trend-wise is we're not even getting beat on our best day, and I'll explain quickly, is that again, when we do root cause, it all comes down to vetting. Vetting is the number one item to where this is why these strategic thefts are happening. So, for me, it's just getting back to the basics and having, your staff asking questions and just using industry standard practices. And, I like to defer to my friend Danny here, to get his input because I know that he's very intertwined with what's going on with these fictitious pickups.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, fictitious pickups, strategic theft, theft by fraud, theft by deception, whatever you want to call it, has really, taken the next step post-pandemic. With the proliferation of remote work, it's not just office workers who have taken to remote work post-pandemic. It's cargo thieves as well, right? So when they figured out that you can steal loads from behind a keyboard and you can steal them 12, 24, 36 at a time, rather than following a tractor trailer down the road physically and waiting for it to be unattended and then stealing that tractor trailer and having to physically drive it to where you want to take it, has really changed the game. It's changed in terms of, the scalability of cargo theft, the return on investment. A lot of these corporate buzzwords that we talk about, in board meetings and stuff like that, cargo thieves have really latched onto. So the new normal really is, how can we make it scalable? How can we make it lower risk? Theft. And, I say strategic theft, that's the blanket term that some of us in the industry have started referring to it to. But I will caution you to be specific when you talk about these types of theft and keep in mind your audience, right? When we're talking to supply chain professionals, I think the term that's been adopted is strategic theft. But if you're talking to law enforcement, you tell them that your cargo has been strategically stolen, they're going to look at you like you don't know what you're talking about. When we talk with law enforcement in terms of theft by deception, and theft by fraud, because these are legal terms. These are law enforcement terms that a law enforcement officer will understand. And it helps them to pursue this because a lot of times when you're looking at this in the field as it's happening in real time, if you're trying to get a response out there in real time, an officer who doesn't know the nuances of strategic theft is going to look at this and say, hey, this is a contract issue. This needs to be settled in front of a judge. This has nothing to do with, law enforcement boots on the ground. But we've seen literally dozens of different MOs that have evolved within the strategic theft biome, if you will. And they'll get mixed and matched and layered depending on what target they're pursuing, which also leaves them, unfortunately, like a path of escalation. If somebody's going to implement incremental security, the bad guys are going to have a next step to defeat that first increment that you implemented, right? And they're going to have a path of escalation that they're going to follow to continue to be successful. But some of the really interesting, the ones that we've seen, besides identity theft of brokers and carriers and even drivers, is things like transloading the load, right? Moving it into a different trailer, which essentially, from an investigative point of view, is laundering the freight, right? That's then different freight if it's in a different trailer. And if you created a new piece of paperwork for that, a new BOL for that, that's completely laundered. You no longer can prove, unless you get down to the serial number level, that is the specific cargo that was stolen from a specific location. But Matthew, if you have anything else to add?
Well, so y'all kind of hit it. I mean, the big things that we're seeing across our companies is carriers having their identity stolen, and then these, fraudulent carriers or, fraudulent players reaching out trying to take cargo in their name and taking it to transload places. And we've had some instances where, equipment's been stolen, alcohol's been stolen, and trying to recover those and work with law enforcement has never been an easy thing with them, because a lot of them, they don't understand, what we do and how we do it, and just kind of how these carriers are playing these schemes. They're a small town, law enforcement officer who then has to refer it up to a detective who then has to get, help involved. And by then you're 3 or 4 days behind, and, all your product is gone or already in a container heading somewhere else.
I think one thing too, Grant, that is it's important to mention. We are seeing stuff that we've never seen before. So I'll give an example. We're seeing counter surveillance. We are seeing bad actors dressing up in our clothing. We are seeing them using cloned phones. We had one situation where a driver was followed over 500 miles from origin, and the thieves waited until he got to a gas station to try to make their move. So they've definitely become more brazen. And then adding on to the complexity of the strategic or fictitious pickups, it's just created a big vacuum here. On top of, you have tenured truck drivers that are retiring, whereas you have new ones that are coming up that might not have that experience. So you have truck drivers that are making bad decisions. But I do want to be clear, and I know Danny will agree with me on this. The issue that we have with the strategic pickups all comes down to vetting. And if you are asking the questions and you are following your policies, then at that point, your risk is very limited. It's when we get to Friday afternoon and the boss is saying, hey, move this freight, move this freight, move this freight. And we do a deal with the devil. Let's find somebody on the Facebook Marketplace chat. I mean, of course, that sounds like a great idea. And then it just turns into a snowball of just, a lot of fun. So it's a different time right now. And, we as practitioners, what we're telling to our companies and to our peers is just follow the basics. I even tell, the folks that report to me, I can sell all day long to the C-suite when they come through 5 layers, because we all know as security practitioner, it all comes down to layers. Criminals are still inherently lazy and want the easy stuff. So we're just trying to put as many layers as we can to reduce that risk. But when we're not doing any of it, the thieves are going to continue to do their schemes because it's very profitable and they're not being stopped.
Yeah, I think what stands out to me from the conversation so far, we've talked about some of the business buzzwords, the scalable risk mitigation from the thieves' perspective, right? And being able to conduct fraud, in a work from home kind of operation, as a way to both increase the scale and decrease the risk on that. So I'm wondering maybe, to get y'all to talk about how the increased reliance on technology and some of the digital platforms, as they become more prevalent, how that impacts the landscape of freight fraud, maybe creating new vulnerabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the adoption of new technology in this industry is a double-edged sword, right? Because it's going to help in efficiency, it's going to help in visibility. But when we're dealing with a lot of independent type folks who are operating this technology, a lot of owner operators and things like that, they're not necessarily the most up to speed on technology. And I'll tell you for sure, if we're dealing with an owner operator, there's no one in that carrier who's in charge of cybersecurity training. There's nobody in that organization who's in charge of making sure you're resistant to social engineering and phishing scams. It's just the one guy in there, right? But conversely, there's also technology that enables this theft, right? Because a lot of this industry is still ink and paper, and a great example for that, and one of the more recent developments in terms of strategic theft is what I've coined the slab method, which is shorted load altered BOL, right? And it's only been the last 2 years or so that applications have come out on smartphones where you can actually scan a document, turn it into a PDF, and edit it right on your phone. You combine that with either an in-cab printer or a stop at a FedEx Kinko's to print out a new BOL, and you can take a shipment that's going to a big box distribution center, the kind of receiving facility that has very rigid receiving procedures. They receive from dozens, if not possibly hundreds of shippers, and they're very, very busy, and they're still taking paper BOLs, right? So you give them a paper BOL that says, hey, we're delivering 1 pallet. That's not necessarily uncommon for that DC to receive a shipment of 1 pallet. So they say, cool, they'll unload the 1 pallet and take it into inventory, but it's not until that receiving facility, sometimes months later, talks to the shipper and says, hey, that shipment that you sent only had 1 pallet. It was supposed to have 40. And then they start, doing all the math and looking at all the other shipments that same carrier carried for them. They're like, hey, all 200 of these shipments over the last several months have come in 90% short. So that's technology can be a double-edged sword in both ways. And because supply chain security is a team sport, we need everybody who's playing on the same team to be on the same sheet of music. Sorry for the mixed metaphor there, but
No, that's great.
Yeah, and I'd like to concur with Danny here. I mean, I think ultimately who this is really affecting is the mom and pop trucking companies who might not have the money to invest in IT infrastructure. But I also want to get a little granular here. You know, I drive down the highways here in Houston all the time, and I'm sure that nobody would be shocked to hear that a lot of these loads don't even have plastic seals on them. So we as an industry have to do better, and we have to educate our employees. And it really needs to be a culture change, right? And so, again, I kind of go back in layers. Yeah, you might not have the money to, heavily invest in AI and stuff like that, but I always come back to you're as good as your people. So when you're talking like a $55 abloy lock, to me, that's a cost of doing business. Something as simple as that. Or, one of the things that we're doing right now is we've identified secure truck stop, or not truck stop, but secure trucking locations to where they meet the criteria that we have for secure parking. And again, it's just layer, 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 layer. And yes, it's, with AI, I mean, I remember when I started live monitoring in 2013 when it wasn't popular. I would say that we must embrace AI, especially if we don't want the Chinese to just, be the one to, take it over. And so, yes, there's a lot of great stuff out there. There's a lot of vetting platforms out there now. But again, it all comes back to education and just following the basics of vetting, what I call vetting 101.
Great. Matthew, do you have anything to add that you're seeing as far as new vulnerabilities that technology use implements into the whole ecosystem of fraud and deception?
Well, I think everybody kind of covered that so far, but just kind of piggybacking off something Jim said earlier when it comes to that vetting and that underwriting of those new carriers or new, players that you're going to be dealing with, is one of the things that we do is once we've identified them as fraud, we just keep going. We keep trying to figure out what their next tactic is, what they're doing. We don't just stop as soon as that red flag's been raised. We're trying to see, we kind of document them to death, keep sending us more information, keep doing this so that we can see, what their next move can be, so we can share it with, our alliance members who we have good relationships with, and we share information amongst each other. I mean, hey, here's this new scheme, here's this new thing that they're coming from, and you know, we like to go every morning and start looking at where all of our emails have come from, what countries they've come from, and start seeing and start tracking those people down. Um, but I mean, a lot of it's, just the basic things that people are neglecting to do is what's costing the biggest money to everybody.
So it sounds like, there's a possibility there to actually use technology to leverage in discovery to figure out, where the legitimate actors are versus, those who are maybe not having all the answers or whatever, or coming from an unknown, unanticipated area.
I mean, we see every morning, at least 30 to 40 emails coming in from Eastern European countries and Asian countries. I mean, they're trying hard, but you've got to have those blocks in, and the standard is the standard, and you can't reduce the standard because it is Friday at 3 o'clock and a truck fell off, and you've got to get it moved, or your customer's going to be mad. They're going to be more mad when their cargo gets stolen.
Right.
So, you can't just reduce it one time, because that's the time that you're going to get dinged.
So we've mentioned a couple of times, and anecdotally, end of the work week or end of the day, could be a time to, need to be more vigilant, or at least normally vigilant, not let your guard down. I'm wondering if there's other timing considerations or specific types of cargo that might be more targeted, or specific shipping lanes, routes that maybe are more vulnerable than others. What might people need to look out for?
I would say, there's always the perennial favorites within cargo theft, right? Consumer electronics, high-end clothing and shoes, cost-dense food and beverage products, right? Especially energy drinks within food and beverage. But that being said, the liquidation landscape for organized criminals has really changed in the last 5 or 6 years. It used to be a very traditional organized crime structure, which still exists within cargo theft, right? Where your theft crew will go out there and steal the product. They'll then deliver it to a fence. The fence is going to then sell it to the person who or the organization who ordered it. It then gets distributed and then disseminated to the end users of whatever that product is. Now we've got a criminal direct consumer sales pipeline, right? They can steal something from behind the same keyboard that they fraudulently stole it from. They can then drop ship it to an e-tailing website or put it up on social media marketplaces, and they're now collecting 100% of the profits on that without having to pay for the inventory. So what is being stolen, the threshold of what is profitable for them to pursue has really been lowered. Everything is now profitable for them. But the other thing is they're incredibly agile, right? They can react to market trends at the drop of a hat. The maximum amount of lead time that they need is the amount of time it takes to get their tractor from where they are to the place where they're targeting the cargo. That's the entirety of their lead time that they need. So if something is in retail shortage, if something is in purchasing restrictions, if something is going viral on TikTok, any of these things are going to make something become more targeted within the supply chain space.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Danny remembers when with COVID, I mean, the emergence of social media and the 24-hour news cycle. I mean, we were getting toilet paper that was getting targeted on the rail, in our trucks, et cetera. So it's just, again, and to Danny's point, there's new organized groups, and this is easy pickings, if you will. So, really it comes back on us to, put in those mitigation standards. And then also too, I'd be remiss not to mention this. It is so important that us security practitioners are sharing intel. I'm not talking about sharing company secret information or anything like that, but if they're hitting me at Crane, then they're probably hitting Matthew too. So, when I was a police officer, the way that we solved crimes, because criminals don't care about geographical boundaries, and by networking with different agencies, that's how we got crime solved. So I think it's equally important, that we mention that. And then Mandy, I saw your comment about the generators. Absolutely, and think of it from the perspective of taking it for scrap metal. Because the generator is heavy, but we've seen where the thieves will just scrap them. So it's and tell Scott I said hello too, Mandy. But it's just, again, cargo theft from 22 to 24 is up 81%. From now to current, it's up 25%. We have containers in LA port that we know from intel that are getting tagged by the cartel of, hey, here's the expensive stuff that you want. And they wait for it to get down to the rail, because the rail traditionally has not provided proper security coverage. And then they just pick them off there. So definitely interesting times.
Yep. To add on to that, to Mandy's point about generators being a hot commodity during hurricane season, that's a great point. Some of the things that we see spike seasonally or based on certain events are shingles and lumber. Anytime a major disaster hits in the U.S., usually in that area or within the surrounding several states, we'll see a spike in thefts of both shingles and lumber. And believe it or not, every January in the run up to the Super Bowl, avocados get targeted pretty consistently, because the price of avocados actually about doubles every January in the lead up to the Super Bowl. since about 90% of them come from Mexico. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. Another one, you can track the price of copper as a commodity, and if you see that going up for more than like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, you can pretty much bet that any loads of scrap copper or anything that contains a lot of bulk copper, the targeting is going to go up on those as well.
I mean, something that nobody really thinks about, but I mean, we have a pretty big presence in the agriculture side of transportation, and we're seeing a lot of uh, just wheat, corn, just your typical grains being stolen and targeted down in the southern parts of Texas and across the U.S. Milk and those milk tankers, they're being targeted and affected, especially when you know, you're kind of dealing with drop yards in the U.S. and drop yards in Mexico and having somebody move them. I mean, it's not just e- it's not just the cargo, but it's also the equipment is being targeted and used, by cartels and other bad actors. Because if you see a milk trailer running down the road with another 500 of them, I mean, there's been instances where they'll start putting false walls and liquid, drugs in there and trying to bring those back over.
Mm. Well, I want to transition us a little bit towards some of the prevention strategies. I know we've already touched on a bit of this. We've heard about vetting and layers, education and intel sharing and cultural change, but maybe we can go a level deeper and talk just a little bit about maybe 2 or 3 prevention strategies related to vetting. What does that look like tactically for some of these drivers, small operations, or logistic companies, especially that are wearing many hats?
Sure. So, I will first of all throw my hat in with Jim and say 100% vetting. I know he said it a couple times already, but vetting can't be overstated. The importance of vetting really is going to take care of the lion's share of your risk, right? Beyond that, I'm a big fan of visibility, right? You can't fix a problem if you don't know you have it. You can't fix a problem if you don't know where that problem specifically is and what that problem specifically is. So getting granular visibility into your supply chain really helps. I like adding remote compliance monitoring on top of that because then we can identify patterns of behavior that indicate fraud, patterns of behavior that indicate theft, or we can determine by the patterns of behavior whether it's indicating just double loading, which is still not great, but it doesn't quite escalate to the point of theft, right? But all of these things are actionable intelligence, contextual intelligence that help you make informed decisions in real time around your supply chain.
No, that's a good point, Danny. And I mean, I will say, just as a security practitioner, that overhaul has been a game changer for us. I can't state the importance of using not just what you're learning from the data, but using it as actionable items that open the eyes of your transportation department, and they can actually see, hey, we thought that this was okay, and what we found out is the drivers are not following. So I don't want to sit here and come as close to saying that we need to micromanage the load. But as somebody who is very anal about, us not getting our trucks hit, we just have a very short leash, with the drivers, and we have, redundancy. One thing that I did last month is I reached out to ASSA Abloy and I said, please tell me that you guys have a remote heavy duty lock that we can unlock from our GSOC and lock, and then it just takes it out of the hands of the driver. And I'm being told that it is a priority, it'll come soon, but right now we're dealing with a price point of $500 per unit. So obviously that's not going to fly, certainly with a mom and pop. But going back to Danny's point, just ask questions. Like if you see a gmail.com, then, not to say that, brokers don't have Gmails, but, pull it up, do a little bit of research. One of the current fictitious pickups that we had was, some of the, or the guy that was, the main person trying to get the freight delivered, the bad actor, represented himself as a VP at a very large company. A simple search of the internet clearly showed that he is not a VP, and that he doesn't even work for the company. So again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but going and using the basics is what's going to protect you.
Yeah, and two, to kind of go off that, if there's a domain, copy and paste that domain back into, your search bar, because it's very easy for them to kind of create one, and instead of it being an L or lowercase L, it's an uppercase I, and that's going to throw everything else off for you. And putting those domains into searches will definitely help you.
Well, and sometimes it's the drivers who are the victim of some of these complicated schemes with double brokering and different things like that. Is there, what does vetting look like from that perspective, especially for somebody who's busy trying to stay on the road?
Yeah, for specific vetting practices, one of the things that we do, I mean, obviously, if you can be a part of an organization, a data sharing organization that gives you lists of known bad actors, that's fantastic. But there's a lot of companies out there, right, that perform carrier vetting. Overhaul's got a function that does it, and there's several others as well. But beyond that, if you don't have any of those, look up that carrier on Safer, right? Just first of all, look up the US DOT number. Make sure all of the information on there makes sense. Does the mileage that they have on there match for the amount of units that they have? Does everything look like it's up to date? Does the license plate state for the tractor match the state that the carrier is registered in, especially if it's only one or two trucks? But then just to go a step farther, take the address out of that Safer listing and take the phone number out of that Safer listing and just perform a Google search with that address and perform a separate Google search with that phone number. See if it comes back to multiple businesses or multiple carriers or multiple logistics related entities, right? Because that's a red flag. And it might not necessarily mean that you're definitely dealing with a bad actor, but this is information you need to have to ask informed questions, to gather the information that you need to figure out if you're actually dealing with a legitimate entity or somebody who's trying to defraud you.
Yeah, and a lot of these people, they're putting these mailbox centers, where there's an address there, and that's, if you start looking it up and there's, a FedEx or something like that, or USPS center in there, that's a red flag, at least to start digging a little deeper, finding out who all has those. One of the things that we do is we monitor all of our carriers, we monitor all of our customers every day. That's why I know a lot of carriers get upset with brokers, but we're validating the VIN to make sure it's actually on your insurance policy and not listed on Jim Bob's policy down the road. That's why those things happen. That's why they request tracking and age on authority and want to see inspections. And now they've come out with where you can go and actually check crossings and with cameras and making sure that happens, because we all know it, we all see it. There's carriers in the truck stop, slapping on a new DOT and MC number and new company name and going to pick up the next load. So that's why those things are happening, and those vetting tools are in place. You have to have them.
Yeah, and then Grant too, I think this comes back to relationships, right? Like, know your carriers. We have a core group here that we only use on high value, and we are talking to them daily. We are asking them for trend analysis. So, a lot of these, and I don't want to make a broad paintbrush here just over the canvas, but typically when we are using Joe, Bob, and Billy, that's when the bad things happen. Not to say that it doesn't happen with the bigger companies, but again, having those relationships and those contacts, you can easily figure out if this is a bad actor or not. And the one thing I want to caution about Safer and FMCSA is just the, yes, the fraud, but we also have, carriers that are selling their MC numbers, selling their identity. So there needs to be, other layers there to check. I mean, Danny, I'd be curious to, just to hear your opinion about this.
No, yeah, you're 100% right. And you know what? One of the things that makes it a little bit more difficult is there are some. I hesitate to call them a fraudulent or criminal entity because technically they're not. But part of these bad actor networks, carrier networks, are some carriers that don't perform any type of theft, don't perform any type of double loading. They are strictly intelligence gatherers, right? They're going to show up at origin. They're going to figure out what your process is. They're going to show up at the destination. They're going to deliver the entire load the way it's supposed to be delivered. And they're going to figure out, what the documentation looks like, if there's any rubber stamps that are used, what the initials from the employee that signs off on the proof of delivery looks like. So it can get really, really challenging. But I know Jim will agree with me on this. As a security professional, there's no such thing as perfectly secure. Everyone's got risk. You have to figure out what your tolerance for risk is and where you can accept the risk. And the best way to do that is to be informed about all of the risks that you're taking. That way you can accurately judge which ones are acceptable.
So we've talked about intelligence sharing in the industry and a little bit about education, but to your point, Danny, about being informed, what are some maybe actionable steps that you would encourage carriers or shippers to take as far as making sure they're plugged into reliable information and also getting the kind of training? What is that training and how often?
Great question. And I want to highlight Nick Erdman. Hey, Nick, had put a comment in there a little bit earlier in the chat talking about some of our different trade associations. There's the Midwest Cargo Security Council that Nick is on the board for. There's the Southwestern Transportation Security Council, Pharmaceutical Cargo Security Coalition, which is the PCSC. Find these industry organizations, plug into those, become members, attend their summits. As you know, my law enforcement liaison, John Cannon, often tells me, you want to dig your well before you're thirsty, right? You want to have your network established and in place, know all the people there before you have to call them at 3 o'clock in the morning because something's gone missing. So my number one thing would be definitely become a member of all the industry associations you can possibly become a member of, and attend every meeting, summit, and conference that you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, and phone calls are free. Pick up the phone, call somebody, ask them. I mean, find a mentor, find somebody in the industry, and communicate with them. But stay off social media on some of those things because that is just a big world of misinformation, and they're more of content creators than they are there to provide you education. Because I know one of the things that we do as a financial services provider, we keep every record of every rate confirmation, every bill of lading number, every pro number, PO number, however you want to say it, on these rate confirmations. And if, we're sitting there looking at today's at 5565, and then we see one come in tomorrow that's 4862, that's a red flag. Somebody has taken that rate confirmation from a legitimate load that they had hauled and then altered it, and they're just circulating it, and they're just going to do that until it's time to go to the next one. So, I mean, just use the tools provided. If you don't know what they are or don't know how to get them, ask somebody. I'd be happy to help you, on some of those things. So, calls are free. They don't cost you anything.
Like that, and reach out to us at IHS as well anytime too, and we can help get you hooked up with somebody who can help you with that. Danny, I liked what you said about dig your well before you're thirsty, and you alluded to law enforcement liaison, and Jim, you were talking earlier about sometimes the legal system is slow to get involved or not interested, or maybe it's too challenging with so much misdirection and complexity going on with some of these kinds of issues. But I'm wondering just real quickly if there's some advice for the audience that y'all might offer, as far as how to foster partnerships ahead of time to dig that well before you're thirsty, and who with in law enforcement, or how to reach out. Maybe you've got some examples of successful collaborations based on things that you've been able to establish ahead of time that really paid off.
Yeah, and I mean it's really resources that don't cost you a lot of money. One of the things that I did when I started early on in my career with SIA is, we ordered pizzas and we invited the local police to come down to the stations and just use it as an opportunity to educate them and tell them some of the things that we're seeing. Um, there's the police departments that have public-private partnerships with information sharing. I think the one thing that we just have to be clear on is that, especially with thefts, I want to kind of roll this back a little bit. We've all seen the first 48, and we know what the methodology is as far as chances of solving a crime before the first 48 and after. And really, when these cargo thefts happen, time is of the essence. And one thing that we've seen in the industry, especially when I was consulting, was, the trucking company calls the police and says, "Hey, we have a theft." And the police says, "Okay, what's the tractor number, trailer number, and this and that?" "Well, I don't know." "What's the commodity?" "Well, I think it's this." And as opposed to what we do in our workflow with overhaul is we capture all that data at origin, including their face, their driver's license, identifying marks on the trailer. And then we send the police a secure link with everything they need to be successful and to track it down. So, starting with just the basics of just having that information ready to go. Even if you don't have an overhaul, but you can call police and say, here's all the items. This is where it's at. We're tracking now. You're going to get a lot better of a response as opposed to calling and saying, well, they just stole our stuff. Right. So, I think that's important, but, just to circle back to the question here is don't be afraid to create those partnerships. When I was a police officer, and it was a great career, but, reaching out to, private sector and developing those relationships and just understanding, like, for example, cell phone, thefts and, how it works with the towers and how we can possibly use technology on a theft and stuff like that. And just really understanding. And it kind of goes back to, again, talking about the police collaboration is just educating them. And something as simple as the cost of a large pizza, I mean, it really doesn't cost you anything, but just having those local stations in your network, creating those relationships, man, that goes a long way.
Well, I'll open the floor. If there's a last word to offer on, practical steps that somebody could implement right away. And then, if nothing further from our panel, we'll open it back up to questions. I think Liz has been watching the meeting chat, and I've seen a lot of comments dropped in there and some questions dropped in there. But gentlemen, for the panel, any parting words on encouraging steps that somebody could implement even later today to help make more secure and resilient in their operation?
One of my big things is always checking for red flags at origin, seeing who's coming to pick up your shipment. Making sure that there's no nuts and bolts on the back of the trailer doors, that everything should be rivets. Nuts and bolts indicate that they can open it without breaking the seal. One of the big ones that we see a lot, especially in terms of strategic theft, is and I'm going to preface this by saying there's a lot of things that happen in logistics that are common and legal, but not secure, right? And an example of that is going to be temporary signage on a tractor, a temporary placard. Now, that's not illegal, and I'm not going to say kick out any tractor that comes through your gates with a magnetic placard on the side. But if you see one with a magnetic placard on the side and the license plate happens to be zip tied to the grill at chest height, not down by the bumper, at least ask some questions. We've seen that a lot of times, and what that really indicates is that the markings on that tractor are being changed to the point they're being changed so often that the guys don't want to bend down to screw in the license plate. They'd rather just stand up and zip tie it to the grill, right? So those two things in concert, but there's a myriad of other red flags. Make sure you've got somebody who's looking out for red flags on every tractor and trailer that you load at origin.
Yeah, and make sure that the name on the bill of ladings match the truck that's actually at your dock to pick it up. That's kind of like piggybacking off what Danny just said. I mean, just walk outside and do a once over, but make sure that who the name on the carrier there to pick it up is the name on the side of that truck, and ensure that maybe grab their driver's license, take a photocopy of it, take a photo of them like how Jim does, and have all of that ready to go in the event that something happens. You were proactive enough in your business and ready.
Yep. And I will add to that, when you're documenting everything at origin, please do document everything. Take a picture of the driver, the driver's license, the BOL, the tractor, the trailer, the load inside the trailer, and go all the way to actually taking and documenting a picture of the VIN on the tractor and the trailer if you can as well. Because if that license plate has been swapped out, law enforcement's not going to be able to help you find it. They might help you find the car that the license plate was stolen from, but having the VIN on that tractor is something that can't be swapped out.
And for me, I always go back to what our former president said: trust but verify. Communication is so key. I mean, I'm going to say it again. Communication is totally key. So let's say that you're mom and pop and you can't afford, GPS tracking or something like that. They have these crazy things called Excel forms, right? Or Smartsheet, to where you can import the data in very easily and efficiently. You can do it through a tablet. So, there are certain ways that you can, mitigate risk. And, one thing that I think is important here is, when we root cause these events, it's pretty common that we always hear something to the effect of, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't say anything. And I think getting in front of your employees and saying, it's kind of like active shooter, like 20 years ago, we just didn't talk about it. Like that's just what it was. Your chances of it happening, struck by lightning, whatever. Whereas now it's changed to where we need to have conversations. We need to know what our mitigation plans are. We need to know how to protect our freight. And again, it all starts with just asking questions.
Thank you for that. Liz, are you having a monitoring on the meeting chat questions, or if any of the audience members want to open your mic and talk, also, this would be a good opportunity.
It looks like everybody's doing a great job in answering the questions on the chat, so thank you for that. I do want to add something, though, that Danny said earlier, and I appreciate you highlighting the importance of getting involved with the local organization, association that can help you with your business. Actually, I always tell our members, you don't know what you don't know, right? So coming out and connecting with like-minded individuals and getting involved is so important for your business. I mean, today's conversation is just one of the many steps that we're taking to ensure that our carriers are protected, informed, and connected. So getting involved is so important. So I appreciate you highlighting that, Danny.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. And I'll second Jim's comment about that in engaging with your local law enforcement crew. Make sure, if cargo theft is a concern for you, especially if fraudulent cargo theft is a concern for you, invite your patrol officers, invite your detectives to your facility, give them a tour, tell them what you know about cargo theft and cargo security, show them where your coffee pot is, and tell them that they're welcome to coffee anytime that they're driving by. Trust me, having officers randomly show up at your shipping dock is going to be a great deterrent.
Well, what we do is we have our local law enforcement every quarterly safety meeting. We cook and do burritos and things like that every morning for all the employees, and we bring all of the DPS, all local law enforcement, everybody with a badge that could benefit, us when we need it. And it's a kind of a mutual respect, mutual partnership. they're all invited, and we'll cook burritos all day long and make sure everybody has everything. And they're hearing, one, that we're taking the right steps. We're ensuring that if something happens on the road or at one of our facilities, that it wasn't because our employees or our staff did not know. They know our training program, they know our safety standards, and likewise with them, they'll start talking about, DOT inspections. Here's what's coming up. Here's what we look for. Here's how to stay legal on the road. I mean, and all it costs was $3 or $4 and, food to cook a burrito and give them coffee. Like everybody says, uh, that partnership is invaluable. I mean, it's the most valuable thing you can have is just having that local law enforcement, state law enforcement collaboration.
And if you don't mind me piggybacking on that, hey Jim, how you doing, and team?
Hey, bud.
Ultimately, one of the things, and I've I'm long in the tooth now, but I've had extreme success with the associations, right? Because we always teach our investigators, okay, know your local precinct, and that's absolutely critical. However, there's an overarching. We always talk about security layers, right? Make sure you have fences, cameras, people like guards. You talk about where I've found success is, not every law enforcement person, they're good people and want to do the right thing, can do the right thing. So, you attack it, okay, the Elm Street Police Department is too busy. They don't have a detective to work it. Okay, did we try with the state police investigators? Did we try with HSI? And I've, being a former worker for a large global company, we've made a little more robust investments in law enforcement. All of them, the national sheriffs, the IACP, the Fraternal Order of Police, they all have events every year or every other year. And it's a few more shekels, but it hits it on a more global. So now you got all their leadership going back, talking up your organization, saying, hey, listen, I know, I may not have a contact in this remote area, but the sheriff's office has overarching responsibility. So I met a sheriff in DC at this event, and he made a few phone calls. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's a great forum, and I'm glad you're all doing this because it's mission critical for all of us, and regardless of directly working for a company or consulting. Thanks.
Yeah, Grant, I think Eric brings up a really good point here. We were working a case about a year ago where the local municipality, I don't really think that they had the resources to work it. And also too, the detective was kind of in the twilight of his career, and he just was he was not motivated. So one thing that Eric did well, because Eric knows everybody, is he got a contact with Homeland Security, and that really reinvigorated our investigation. So, just with the ability to not take no for an answer, and just knowing what your resources are important. I saw that Christina had asked a question about red flags, and certainly anybody can contact me outside of this forum, and I have no problem sharing, but I'd be remiss to not mention Chat GPT. It's given me about a quarter back of my day, just by providing quick analysis and red flags and with assessments, etc. So not a plug for Chat GPT, but that's something that can be very helpful as well.
All right. Anybody have some more questions or comments they want to throw out?
I'd like to throw out, Grant, you and I have discussed this before. We have safe and secure truck parking needed. We need 11 more parking spaces for everyone that is safely done. And basically, the government has not written up the proper ways to do that. The truck drivers need to be safe and secure and all by themselves in a 450 truck trailer compound for their night sleep, their day sleep, their everyday's activities. And one way in, one way out. Everything we talked about here about the license plates and the VIN numbers and everything else, that comes in under the security part. And a 7,000 volt electric fence, 10 foot high, with another fence out above it. That is the way it's going to have to be done, because right now we've got 11 people from everyone. That's almost a 1,400,000 parking spaces that need to be made. That's a big number. But if you're going to have a truck on the side of the road and someone's going to say it's a country road, you're going to find the bad guys are going to look for it and they're going to take it. And there was 39 murders in the first 3 months of 2024. And we haven't, and all of those were truck drivers and their trucks and trailers were stolen. And we haven't seen the second quarter of 24 or the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 24 or first quarter of this year, because no one would become a truck driver if they got the numbers of how bad it is out there. So we have this problem to solve, and that problem needs to be solved financially through investment, maybe by the truck companies to try to look at how they can do it to themselves, but also through the federal government, the state government, and bring this to a head. We've got great organizations here that, and everybody on this call is thinking about the right way to do it, because this is a very serious problem. But we need that. This is a humanitarian problem too. So I'm just saying that. And Grant, you and I had this discussion just a couple of days ago. So I'll just put it out there for everyone to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Frank.
one of the things, to kind of go off that, like you're talking about, one of the things that we do whenever we're kind of moving like a high value or kind of a military or government freight is we'll call the state yards that we're going to be passing through, like the TxDOT yards or, the road crew yards. And a lot of times they'll let you park there in their secured facility. But you just got to be, you just got to call and ask them, find a local number, explain what you're doing, that you feel unsafe or that you're, hauling something that's a high value, and they'll let you in.
Thanks for that, Matthew. Well, we're out of time for our webinar. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm very grateful to our panelists, Jim, Matthew, and Danny, for joining us and sharing your expertise and your knowledge. Thank you to all of you who have attended and participated so robustly in the chat and with your questions and comments, and especially for Liz and the whole Greater Houston Trucking Association. Definitely check them out, helping us get the word out on this and make this available and possible. You can look for this on our website. I dropped the link in the chat. It's ihsonline.org. And search us up, Sam Houston State University Institute for Homeland Security. We'll have this posted as soon as we can. Goal for tomorrow. Thank you all, and have a fantastic, safe, resilient, and secure rest of your week.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Grant.
Good job.
Nice job.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.